Right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Economy Overview and Scrutiny Panel, 10th of March. And we welcome everybody to the meeting. And can we have the apologies, please, Alison?
We've had apologies from councillors Martin Allen, Mark Googe, Tony Muir, Bob Brooks and Kyle Daisley.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? None? Okay. Any public participation?
No, we have none.
Can we confirm the minutes of the previous meeting?
Happy to propose. I think Mel seconded.
Yep. Okay, right, so we sign those. And then the first item is item 5, digital connectivity update, and that will be with Steve Ashton presenting.
There we go. Kick off digital connectivity update in terms of we've got broadband, mobile, and then a couple of the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology projects have been operating for the last 12 months. From a broadband perspective, we've now reached the end of contract 1. The deployment on contract 1 finished some time ago. We've just been monitoring it for the last 7 years and effectively recovering any gain share that was due back to the County Council and what was then Broadband Delivery UK. From positive gain share. The project was an absolute success, obviously, in contract 1. All of the money that Worcestershire County Council invested into capital broadband in works have been recovered. This is the mechanism by which it prevented the private sector partner from making excess profits. And again, without that work, we wouldn't be in the right place when COVID came, and even before that, we saw huge benefits from an economic perspective. There is an amount of money to be paid back to Broadband Delivery UK from Worcestershire County Council. That's just a case of them submitting the invoice to us and we'll pay that back. Contract 2, the final take-up review point is in this summer. Again, we're expecting a return of money from BD UK, and then again we'll pay a proportion of that back to Broadband Delivery UK in line with the investment ratios that was put into that. The final contract, contract 3, that finishes in the December 25. We're not, because of the investment ratios that were put into that one, we put far less money in than we'd had previously. We've not actually reached a point whereby any money's been returned to Worcestershire County Council yet. There was a contract change within the contract that said also that the first 300k approximately of money that would be gain share would need to be retained by BT. It was a risk piece, and as we've not reached that, that's another kind of positive decision in our favour there, that they covered that through. So that's the first part of the report. We then move on to the gigabit capable broadband investment. So the government announced a £41 million investment into Worcestershire in January. That's with Openreach as the main delivery agent of that lot. They're currently working through the beginnings. We're not expecting any delivery until the end of this calendar year at the earliest, most likely next financial year, next year where we'll start to see some operation on that piece of work that Openreach will do across the county. That 41 million should bring us in above the existing local targets by 2027. There are some delay risks associated with that, and it should get us to about 97% overall coverage. We obviously want to go further, but that's what that contract will get us to. The very hardest to reach premises, it may be different technologies, different solutions that get us there, and we'll start to look at those once we start to understand what the Openreach full solution looks like. So that's Project Gigabit, and again, that's not being managed by us this time, it's important to add. So the last 3 contracts we've invested into, we've managed them locally at Worcestershire County Council and worked on a relationship with Openreach. Therefore, we've had some element of steer at how things have gone, priority areas, that sort of work. This time it's being managed by Broadband Delivery UK on behalf of the government as an executive agency on their part. We will continue to be involved. We will manage stakeholders. We will obviously have to work with highways to make sure we minimise disruption with our local programmes or with other bits of work. We will highlight concerns. We will highlight priority areas, but we won't have the same level of influence as we had on the first contracts. But we do maintain a good relationship with Openreach since the contract's finished. And again, I think we're fairly confident that relationships between the organisations will see benefit for Worcestershire where we need to, and avoid any big risks becoming high. We can mitigate those risks through that management. Moving us on to the commercial programme in terms of broadband as well. We'd anticipated this to some extent. So Project Gigabit coverage was massive last year, and was even higher than we thought it would be. In the last sort of 6 months, that progress has slowed. We anticipated it slowing. The market is struggling financially in terms of completing its commercial obligation or what the plans they've committed to. Basically, backers have got a little bit nervous, I think, at low take-up rates of some gigabit products, which then means the operators have stalled their builds. City Fibre, for example, had a contract management matter that they had to deal with locally, and then they're now not planning to return to Worcester. They built a good number of premises. I think it was around the 20,000 mark, 21,000 according to the reports. But they won't now finish their build plans. That's not a massive risk to us because they're in commercially viable areas where we've seen the likes of Openreach still deploy. We've seen a company called Full Fibre or B Fibre deploy as well in those spaces. So we know where we are. Virgin Media O2 continue to invest in the county. Openreach continue to invest in the county. Brisk have got a couple of deployments to the north of the county, and Full Fibre have got a slight build, but build is much slower than it was, and I think the next kick we will see in those figures starting to rise steadily again will be through Project Gigabit or the Openreach deployments. Mobile connectivity wise, obviously we've been focused for the last 6 months or so on drive trials across the Riverstone Partnership. The Riverstone Partnership Advanced Wireless Innovation Region, funded by DSIT. We put monitoring devices onto bin lorries. We drove the streets of Worcestershire, I should say. Other counties are continuing that build. So Gloucestershire's not finished yet, so the whole collection exercise isn't done. We haven't crunched all the numbers on those drive trials, but they were successful in Worcestershire. We got them done. We've also taken devices, lent them to landowners to allow landowners to assess the land, because for farmers, lawn working can be a real concern in places. So they've been able to do some analysis of their coverage of off-road pieces. We've walked devices around the city centre. We've taken them onto the trains and done the train lines as well, because again they're important. So we're able to see what the coverage is there. The checkers are about to be made live for people, so it's the aim there is that residents will be able to check it and look at and see what coverage is, what might be the best solution for them. So, but yeah, and we're hoping to be able to make an announcement at the end of this week in terms of what our findings have been for coverage in the county. We've also we launched before Christmas. We launched a study where we were asking residents and businesses to self-report issues in the county. That received, at the time of the report, was written, over 900 responses. Again, we'll be updating that at the end of the week with our latest set of data. But I think what we can see by the map in the report is it's not just the rural areas that we have challenges in; it's urban areas too. And they're not every district of the county is impacted by people complaining of poor mobile coverage, what they wouldn't expect. So we know good coverage is beneficial for the economy, so that's something we want to address too. We've been working with a company called Atlas across Worcestershire as well. Atlas are investing in mast infrastructure, shared mast infrastructure for multiple operators to go on. We've seen an application in Cleve Prior be submitted and accepted for that. An application for mast at Welland is currently under consideration, and has the community's really got behind that mast. There's about 40 responses so far in support of building the mast on the portal, on the planning application portal, and then there's about 10 or so other masts that Atlas are trying to build or would want to build, providing the operators wanted to work with them, and they're in various stages of preparing to put applications in for mast sites. So again, we're trying to be proactive. We're trying to get some early wins ready for when our results come out and what that looks like. And I think trying to leverage that private investment is really important for us. Finally, a very quick update on the two on the two Department for Science, Innovation and Technology projects. The first one was One Word. On One Word, we've taken a mobile network on wheels out to a number of events across the county, mainly in the summer, but we did do a number in the autumn, and again, we did the Christmas fair at Worcester at the end, where we saw events that struggling with connectivity. People can't take card payments, so our network was allowing them to take those card payments, and again, positive feedback from the majority of people, certainly the people who got onto our service. There's an element of education with people as well, so they understand what it's about, what it does, how it works, that we need to do. But that's been massively successful over the last 12 months, we think, and those vehicles will remain with Worcestershire after the project's finished. So again, if we can utilise them and use them in the best way moving forward, that'll be a positive step. And the River Severn Partnership Advanced Wireless Innovation Region was due to finish at the end of March. In January, there's been granted an extension. That extension will take them towards the end of September. It isn't to do anything new, it's just to carry on doing the work we were doing. This is the project that funded the drive trials, but we've also invested and looked into agriculture, farming, water industries, and how we can apply technologies in the public sector. Some of those projects where Worcestershire's benefited through that is we've put a mobile network improvement system into Wildwood, so staff and visitors to Wildwood can access them. If you've been into Wildwood in the last 12 months, you've probably recognised the mobile service hasn't been great there, so we've put a system in that will improve that. We've invested and looked at mobile fed a bridge, the footbridge in Worcester, the recently built footbridge. We've put a wireless base system to support the CCTV there, because it wasn't viable to put a fibre in there. So we've looked at that and explored that, and we're also looking at mobile-based traffic signals when the PSTN network gets switched off. We'd identified a risk in the council that we were going to have some old copper signals that we were going to have to upgrade to make sure they were working. We've used that project money to fund that, to see if wireless will solve that problem for us when it happens. So we're waiting to see what the outcome of those projects are. And that probably is a whistle-stop tour of the report, and open for questions.
That's great. Mel, yes? Would you like to?
Thank you. A couple of questions, and apologies for being late. With mobile coverage, I guess we have a definite defined strategic direction based around what we know now, or is it more of a case that we're more reliant on what the private providers want to do? I appreciate they're the ones who put the funding behind it. Is that, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, if it's okay, Chair, if I can come back on that, because we're going to have a lot more information on the mobile side in the next few days in terms of data and whatever. We're just collating all the information that's going to come together. But I think obviously from our perspective, we know it's not. We know there's problems both locally and nationally, but I'm hoping in the next few days, really, Mel, to have a lot more information available on it, really, in terms of where we are, if that helps.
Yeah, that's useful to know. And I think I will add, and I will report it myself, actually. Obviously, I've been based a lot at the Guildhall this year, and particularly on a Saturday, it seemed to be really struggling with the coverage, whereas in the week, it doesn't seem much of a problem. And I have no idea how it all works, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I had 2 calls cut off on the way here, actually. So I think that encouraging residents and businesses to report where they've got specific problems is absolutely critical, really, because you do get a change in the day as well. So you can get a service working in the morning that won't work on a Friday afternoon, for example. So I think encouraging as many residents as possible to complete the survey, and businesses, is critical. But I'm hoping we'll have a much more information available to be released in the next few days.
Okay, and that's good. And I mean, the thing is, if the Ofcom figures are wrong and don't match up with what we're actually experiencing, and I know Malvern Retail Park is one urban area that doesn't happen, then that's quite serious. And what can we actually do about it?
I think as soon as we've got the data, I think we're going to make quite a big deal of it, really, to be perfectly honest. But until we've got that all pulled together and ready to present, I'd rather get it out in one go, if you know what I mean, in terms of where we are. I think probably coming back to something that Steve's spoken about, and I'd probably like to raise, because the team's done an incredible job here. We've just got £41 million to extend broadband across Worcestershire to gigabit. And I think I'm sure colleagues in this room will agree that the steps that were taken, despite some not wanting to follow them in the early days with the Superfast programme, has probably transformed the way that Worcestershire can operate economically and for the residents in the county. And I think if we can get all those people that have been, I suppose, in a sense, left behind up to speed now with gigabit, it's going to make a huge difference to the outcome for the residents and the businesses in Worcestershire. And I just think, I'll just repeat that number again, £41 million. You know, it's going to make a huge difference. I think, what is it? It's 22,000 odd premises that we're talking at the moment, but it really is a good news story for Worcestershire. It's something obviously everybody knows I'm really passionate about, but I think if we can get everybody in Worcestershire with gigabit broadband, then it's really going to help them in terms of running businesses and all the types of things that they need to do from home and at work now.
Ian, did you have?
I've got two red lights. Sorry, what Mal has just said and what Adam has referred to, is that to do with load, overload? I mean, I'm trying to understand the three examples that were given. So what is the real cause of that?
Are you referring to the mobile or the broadband?
No, sorry, what you were saying on the way to the meeting this morning.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's just, I think Steve discussed about somebody putting telecoms masts in. Obviously, a lot of public now are sort of, there is some resistance to telephone masts in terms of being put up to provide the mobile signal. But I think there's a lot of different technical factors involved. And I think, you know, we are going to have the information that we can bring, you know, in terms of a much more technical and detailed report. And then rather than going through each little bit, I suppose what I'd say is there's many causes to the problem. Yeah, and hopefully by the end of this week or maybe next, then we'll have a much more definitive answer, because we're collating all the information from those residence surveys and from the bin lorry survey. And I think it's going to make really interesting reading, and it may well be a national situation, not just a local one. I don't think we're the only ones with that problem.
Well, we look forward to that. With regards to the masts, obviously that's great news that some progress is being made, but obviously there are still some obstacles. I presume you will be when the mast at Cleve Prior is installed, you will be looking to measure the effect of that, so that you know, that can be communicated to other parishes.
Yeah, we'll certainly look to leverage that point. I think it's also important to say that the mast at Cleve Prior, that before they will build it at Atlas, they need to get the commitment from the mobile network operators to want to host on it and pay them the rent, if that makes sense. So Atlas are prepared to put the capital up to build the mast, and that requires the operators to put their equipment on that mast for it to be a sustainable product for Atlas to move forward. They've got a long-term, their investment, mainly pension provider pots. They've got a long return time on those bits of infrastructure. And I think for us, you know, if a mobile operator says it's too expensive to build their own, doesn't buy in, then the fact that Atlas put the capital in should make that an easier business decision for them. What we need to do is work and push to convince the operators that they want to go on those masts as well. What we don't want to happen is them to say we're not interested in this space.
So it really is multifaceted, yeah. Yeah. Any other questions regarding digital infrastructure? Ian? Yeah.
Thank you. Just to say, I look forward to the results that you say I think will be available at the end of March. So for our next meeting, we'll be able to bite into that, won't we? To be punny.
A question I have, obviously we've got results at the end of March, and also we've got further results, where was it, the end of December. When do you think is the next appropriate point to put digital infrastructure under scrutiny? When would it be appropriate?
Can I just pop back? I think probably the next meeting we will have that information in terms of the mobile side. You know, obviously from a broadband perspective, that's ongoing, and now the contract's been placed, the 41 million's allocated, so it's just a case of Steve spending it, I suppose, or you know, Openreach actually delivering it. So I think really on the mobile side, you could definitely bring it back to the next meeting.
Okay, that's very good, thank you. Yeah. Okay, have we got anything else on digital infrastructure? No, thank you very much. That's brilliant. Thank you. Right, okay, so we've got performance and in-year budget monitoring 2024-25, and can we pass to Dave, please?
Thank you, Chair. The performance report that starts on page 9 of the printed pack is includes updates up to the end of the December quarter, so end of December, it was quarter 3 of the financial year. And there were a couple of updates we've had since performance was last part of the scrutiny panel's agenda, which was in November. There have been some updates on business survival rates and a little bit on the sustainability team's update as well, which I was put in here, although there's that crossover, of course, with the environment panel. I would say as well, Chair, there's a link in the appendix for the printed copy, which is supposed to take you to the Our Performance page, where there's the Power BI report. It's my fault it doesn't work. It's the page address had changed and I hadn't checked, so my apologies. But the Power BI report for this, which contains all the same information as is in this printed report, that's on the Our Performance page of the County Council website, and on there we've now got Power BI reports for this panel, also for Environment panel, and also Corporate Communities. So the information for their Wednesday meeting, for example, has been posted there in Power BI form. And I think on earlier in the month, it was last week towards the end, the first risk report in Power BI format went on for Audit and Governance Committee, so that will continue to be reported as a Power BI. So we're trying to get as much information as possible now in both the Power BI format as well as the more traditional mediums as well. In terms of a sort of run through, I'm happy to take questions of course after, but there's the information that did come out not long after the panel had last met about business survival rates, the latest sort of annual data that came through, and that really referred to a set of information, and although there were a couple of graphs there's information that starts on page 20 of the printed pack, various tables, and it's really businesses starting in 2022, for example, and whether they were still trading in 2023. That 1 year business survival rate that the panel's looked at before, I think. And that's interesting in that across England, the overall percentage of businesses still trading a year after they began in 2023, that was 92.3%. That was actually slightly lower than the previous year. If we looked at businesses that were trading after a year in 2022, it was 93.5%. But Worcestershire bucks that trend. The figure of 92.9% of businesses still trading after a year in 2023, that actually compares favourably. The previous year, the equivalent figure was 88.6%. So in 2022, 88.6% of businesses that had started a year before were still trading. So we've improved on that in the succeeding year. And across all the districts, the figures all went up. So businesses, again, started 2022, still trading a year later, right across the board, all went up, with the largest percentage point increases being, there was, for Malvern Hills actually, it was, they moved up from 91.4% of businesses that were trading after a year in 2022 to 94.4% of businesses started in 2022, still trading in 23. And there was a similar Wychavon also saw a nearly 4 percentage point increase. So, but all of the district areas, and obviously then for the county as a whole, can boast that increase in survivability of businesses. In terms of just a little bit lower on there, pages 22 and 3, the adults, the working age employment, but also is sort of again a similar picture in that traditionally the Worcestershire figure of adults in employment, the percentage of 16 to 64-year-olds is usually above the England figure. That was used many years ago as the comparator in one of the previous corporate plans, and we've stuck with it. It's a good benchmark to have. And the Worcestershire figure, 80.34%. This time again, it's above the England percentage, so statistically it's significant enough that it would count as a green for the indicator. even if the percentage gap has slightly dropped compared with the end of the previous quarter, but nothing to be unduly concerned about. And then that would lead into just the next little page on about employment, payrolled employees. And again, Worcestershire's figure slightly down in December compared with 3 months previously, and ever so slightly down by less than a percentage point down compared with 12 months previously, compared with the December 2023 figure. But actually, the drop for us was slightly less than it was across England and the UK. So again, Worcestershire, still having a higher proportion of people in employment. There are a couple of concerns. ONS have said about this data set that they think there's a slightly smaller return that they've had. They base this information on pay-as-you-earn returns, and they do include in that people, for example, who are on paid leave as well. And they're saying that the last couple of quarters they've had to use a slightly smaller set of returns. So they're saying it doesn't call into question the validity of the figures, but just to take them with a little grain of salt, perhaps. But I think that there's, generally speaking, I'm not sure whether colleagues here would say that there's any local factors, but certainly nationally, the general feeling was that there may be just usual seasonal factors at work. Although in previous years, the figure for December has often been pretty similar to the September one. So locally, we did see it drop slightly this particular year, or in 2024. On jumping a bit further ahead and just covering a little bit that Steve obviously covered brilliantly in a lot more detail, but it was on page 33 in the printed pack. It was the information about from Think Broadband about both broadband and gigabit percentages, and the Worcestershire percentage that's shown for the gigabit, the 83.59 from Think Broadband, that was at the end of December. And as Steve rightly said, that percentage now it continues to increase. We're still slightly below the figure, the percentage for the UK, but the gap is very close. It's 85.9% of premises in the UK at the end of December got access to, well, were passed for connection to gigabit. We've had the debate before at the panel about what the percentage actually indicates. It's the number of premises, businesses that are passed for gigabit access. Whether they then choose to take up that is of course up to them. But the figure there has continued to close, and as Steve alluded to, there is a target that's outlined in the current corporate plan: 90% of premises in Worcestershire to be connected to gigabit or have access to gigabit by December 2027. And Steve said there's every indication that the current programmes will ensure that we meet that. And I think it's 100% connectivity is the government's, both the previous government and the current government's commitment by 2030. So we'd be in line with that. And in terms of, it's always an interesting area. Just jumping a little bit forward onto page 34 and 5, where there's the train journey information. With impeccable timing, I think the last panel met in mid-November, and a few days later the Office for Rail and Road issued their data set for the previous year, for the financial year 23-4. We've discussed before, it is an interesting set of figures, not ones perhaps that we can have huge influence over. I remember being at a panel some while ago where I think Rachel Hill and Gary were here, and Rachel was saying that there had been, I think, beyond writing to some of the service providers, the companies, there's not too much control that we can exert. But the figures are interesting in a sense. I think as well it's the move back towards COVID and pre-COVID levels. Office Rail and Road quoted a figure for, it's a large figure, across Great Britain, 23-4 financial year, 1,385 million train journeys in 22-3. Sorry, that was 22-3. In 23-4, the figure rose to 1,610 million. So what they actually, to put that into perspective, they say that is equivalent to about 93% of pre-COVID levels, the 1920 figure. If you looked at Worcestershire's figure, our figure is a little bit lower. So it's still increasing, but it's at about 84% of pre-COVID level for 1920. But it jumped up from 79.6% in 2022-3. So we're seeing the figure, it's sort of incrementally, it's going back up again. And of course, we've seen a lot of good publicity in the press in the last few days around the Parkway, not just the figures, the usage figures, but of course the carbon footprint and the fact that it's carbon neutral because of the work mainly on the basis of the number of journeys that are made from there. If they were people then travelling by car, then you'd have a certain kilogram of CO2 equivalent that would be much higher. So in that sense, Parkway more than offsets its carbon footprint. The other figures as well on the office rail and road, that set of data, there are lots of different data sets that get used. This one is a bit specific. It used ticketing information, so it may well be that there are figures that are quoted in other areas which are higher. But at least for the panel's purposes, you've got consistent figures here to look at because we've used the same data set for the last 6 or 7 years. I hope that's a bit of a run through, but happy to try and take any queries or obviously to defer to.
Thank you, Dave. That's great. Thank you. And I think Mel has got a question.
Yeah, just one quick one really. With West Midlands Railway, the service can be not the best, shall we say, but I just wonder what influence the county has or can do. It was a couple of things around sort of times and reliance of trains, and also at Foregate Street Station, and that's something I'm tackling from a city level, is the actual toilets at Foregate Street Station. We just had that lovely walkway open and it's really nice, but they are and have consistently been for a long, long time pretty awful. Sorry, it's a bit ad hoc, but I didn't know if there's anything we can do. I would be grateful.
Terribly sorry, Mel, I wasn't aware of the toilets at Foregate Street Station. So that's your local knowledge. I think really the whole rail thing is up in the air anyway, isn't it? I suppose if you're an operator and the government said they're going to nationalise everything, until the thing comes out in the wash and we understand what's going on, we're not going to really know. And I just do hope it's not just more money for train drivers to go on strike, if you know what I mean, because a lot of the times, you're finding that a lot of these services are cancelled because of lack of staff availability. And I think certainly I noticed some of our MPs are leaning in very heavily on the train services locally. And I suppose it's probably going to be more at that level where they get the influence, and we do everything we possibly can in line with Midlands Connect and the other areas as well to try and drive the agenda. But I think really it starts at a local councillor, doesn't it really, and then escalate accordingly. But I took a train from Worcester Parkway the other day, and what a great success that is for the whole of the county, really. But there were only 4 carriages on the train, and it was packed. So I think really victim of our own success in a sense. We can only do so much, but then it's for others to deliver the rest. So I think we've just got to keep the pressure on really in that way and see what we can do.
Thank you. Ian, do you have a question?
Thank you, Dave. I've put these down parrot fashion on page 4, please. Sorry, page 10. Do apologise. And the question I've got here is on the VAT and PAYE-based enterprises. We're looking at the table on page 10. Yeah, we're on the same one. Sorry about that. We're down, so that's my exclamation, is down. Are you able, please, to expand on that?
I'm happy to, if that helps. I think that's just reflective of the kind of economic conditions. I think a lot of it's a trend that's nationally and regionally, and therefore locally, but also a lot of businesses got themselves through COVID and through everything else, and actually have found it then difficult in terms of recovery. So I think some of it's also a bit of a shake-up in the numbers, as Dave identified. So we're still seeing, if you look at it, it's actually right at the micro level where we're seeing most of those businesses fall out.
Could I pop back on that as well? I think because there's somebody who obviously runs a small business and is aware of the problems. The upcoming changes from the government in terms of national insurance, I think, are going to have a devastating effect on many small businesses, not just across Worcestershire and across the county. And when you see the work that Gary's team do in terms of helping businesses grow, the training schemes, Elevate, B to 10 and all the other great programs, I think we've got to really start pushing that. I think there's going to be sort of a survival type aspect. So I do foresee these figures changing dramatically because of the way that the taxation is going to hit small businesses, because at the end of the day they're going to be cutting jobs and cutting costs. And I think at the last council meeting, I think we were all talking about the issue with this and the actual effect and concerning effect it could have on Worcestershire businesses. But I think we've just got to do everything we can to try and help businesses locally with some of the programs that we've got. And maybe it's something I might have a conversation with you, Gary, really after the meeting, in terms of whether we can address those companies that are suddenly hit with this tsunami from next month.
That's right, yeah. Going to be further compounded problems. Ian?
Yeah, thank you. If I can please refer to page 12, the table there, working age adults in employment. Again, my exclamation of down. Is there any information that I could absorb on that, please?
I think when you look at the numbers, there is something around also that piece around the kind of demographics of Worcestershire that just shows that we've got more people kind of heading towards retirement than we have in terms of starting. We've seen youth unemployment rise as well. Probably the last answer kind of reflects some of that as people try and enter the employment market. Like Councillor Kent said, there's quite a lot of support there to help people into work, and more of that is probably likely to come in the coming months, where we're working to basically ensure people come into work, but they've got to have the opportunities to do that. So there's the challenges, I think, in relation to probably what the national economy is experiencing.
Yeah, if I'm able to add to that, because I think it's an interesting question in terms of where you're going to go. I think I was in one of my local pubs the other day, and obviously from their point of view, in terms of what's affecting them in terms of young employment, because a lot of people, particularly in the university sector and everything else, look at the hospitality trade to have a part-time job whilst you're learning. And the impact of some of the changes on the hospitality sector and the pubs is really frightening in terms of the loss of the business rate relief that they've had since COVID. That's having a massive effect. And then the national insurance changes. I mean, I can't really understand it actually, because when I did the analysis, if you're on a low income, the hit to the employer for the national insurance uptake because of the drop of the threshold is absolutely massive. And I really do worry about our pubs, particularly when we've done such great work trying to encourage tourism within Worcestershire with the Visit Worcestershire programme, because the team are doing fabulous things with that in terms of what we're doing. So sometimes you think you're trying to achieve these things with one hand tied behind your back. So I think somebody's got to think very seriously about the way this taxation hike is going to hit those pubs and hospitality, because I think it will have an adverse effect on youth unemployment, and it also unfairly penalises those with part-time jobs. So I just don't understand it, to be honest.
If I may move to page 12, sorry, I beg your pardon, page 13, which is corporate greenhouse gas emissions. I know it's only a slight increase, but is it a trend? Can we examine whether that's a trend or not?
Well, I don't think we're digging in Worcestershire for coal and gas or whatever, but I think I'll let Gary go through this. But having just had to pay for a heat pump to be installed, I think I'm going to be made bankrupt by the time it's finished. But no, I'm sure Gary will assist a little bit with this.
It's literally down to the COVID recovery. So as we come back, people go back into the office, more transport, as Dave identified through, even if it's the rail numbers coming back, it's also the road users, which means from a corporate side, yeah, we've seen a slight uptick, although as you can see, the general direction is still downward. I suppose the other point is, because the benchmark is, goes back to sort of 2006, which what would I say? A lot of the low hanging fruit has been achieved. However, we're working hard with our commercial and procurement team to kind of work on. But yeah, as we get further into this, obviously you're into harder to make any gains, and the cost of doing so becomes more difficult. So those are some of the challenges around the agenda.
Chair, I can supplement that with a bit of background info on the corporate side as well. It's only that there's a breakdown. It's taken from the sustainability team's report, which again is available on the county council's website. And in here, it's on your pack in page 32. There's a little breakdown that uses the sustainability team's categories for the breakdown of corporate emissions, as opposed to the, as Gary's alluded to, both corporate and the county-wide one. And in there, there's a slight increase. Waste disposal, of course, is always a huge chunk of the corporate emissions. There's a slight increase there because the amount of household waste collected increased last year, and as Gary said, that increase was slightly due to do with things like a little bit of an uptick in the with the economy, perhaps people buying a little bit more, and then more packaging to be collected. Growing seasons can also come into all sorts of factors for waste disposal. But also, there's a little increase in the amount of the contract fleet usage. It had a 3.3% share of the corporate emissions in the 23-24 financial year. It was only 2.2% the previous year, and it is simply greater use of it as more people were coming back in. There were meetings held at different county council premises and district council premises indeed. So slightly greater increase there post-COVID. Nothing else that really would be a concern. In fact, it was flagged the other day at the Environment Panel, but of course we see the continued decrease in energy spent on street lighting. So the kilowatt hours figure there is going down because the LED rollout is now complete, and we're seeing a real benefit there, both in terms of the amount of energy expended on street lighting, but also the expense as well. So I'd say really agreeing exactly with Gary, both across the county and corporately, the increase that we've seen really is due to just a few things returning to some sort of normality after COVID, and different use of some of the county buildings, and as I say, a little bit of extra use, increased use of the contract fleet came into it as well.
A big thank you. Isn't it good that we can explain an answer to these questions? Thank you very much. Very good. Can I just have one more go, please? On page 21, very selfishly here, I'm concerned about Wyre Forest. I'm a member from Wyre Forest at the moment, anyway. And we're talking about this low figure, which has been explained on all the previous meetings, as is Bromsgrove, the births of units in 2020 and their survival. At what point do we see Wyre Forest figure get back up in the similar regions as the rest of them, please?
So you're looking at just checking, page 21, the births or the deaths.
The births of units, where it says in the 3% column, the figure's down to 35.8. Yeah?
Yep, I got it. Okay.
Just that rankles a bit.
Yeah, I think this is about the support that we provide in terms of encouraging as many entrepreneurs to take up the advice, guidance as much we can. I don't think it's a Wyre Forest don't take that advice and everyone else does, so I'm not going to be quite as bold as that. But what I would say is that probably is just a kind of reflection of the type of business owners and the type of sectors they're perhaps going into. So maybe there's a challenge around some of that. But I can assure you, in terms of the business support programme that's county-wide, that providing that advice, and that goes from pre-start, any business that's under 3 years, because I suppose what we can see from the figures is that's the biggest risk, and obviously then above that. But I probably to not make you worry too much, I think it's just it's not a phenomenon of geography, it's just a phenomenon of the entrepreneur.
Chair, as well, I can pick up and add a little on that as well. Again, exactly as Gary said, and we've included that long-winded note that's in there like a grumbling appendix about Bromsgrove business births and Wyre Forest, because it was the nature of something which I know we've alluded to before. But I think as well, the ONS data set, they want to try, if they can, it's very difficult for them because the nature of those very short-term registrations of some businesses, not just here in Worcestershire, but nationally, they want to try and purge some of those from the data set to make it a little bit better. And at the moment, what they're saying is they would give a little bit more weight to the more recent figures. So, well, whilst it's, you know, we've already discussed this morning, there's always the concern about newly formed businesses and how they're going to be able to continue. And, but some of the more recent year figures, that 1 year survival rate, the latest figure, both Bromsgrove and Wyre Forest performing very well. So hopefully if they can purge the older data, or we get a more consistent approach in the future to the way that data is reported from ONS, then I think we'll see the figures for both Wyre Forest and Bromsgrove sitting very comfortably with the others, as they do in the 1 year business survival rate table.
That's great. How long do you think that will take to take?
They've actually taught the data set is updated once a year. They've actually said about doing something during this year. Whether that will mean it'll only be when we get the next update in the autumn, or they'll do an interim update before then. That has happened before, but I would say I would hedge on the other side of caution and go for something around September, October time when we get the next data set out.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Any other questions? No? So thank you. And can we move to Sarah for in-year budget monitoring, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll walk you through the overall corporate position at Q3, and then we'll move on to the relevant areas for this panel. So the Q3 position was a forecast net overspend of £14 million. When you look at that as a total of the budget available, net budget available, that's 3.5% overspend. It's a £1.5 million worsening position compared to Q2, which was due in the main to children's services placements, seeing an increase in volume and value there. The general themes that are causing the overspend are ones that have been talked about in all areas of the County Council. So we've got demand-led adult social care, children's social care and home to school transport. There are, however, some chinks of light. So there are some areas that are mitigating the overspend by forecasting small underspends, and that's within E&I and within some of the corporate budgets. All directors are continuing to work on mitigation strategies to continue to address the position for this year end, and then as we move into the new financial year. The table on page 44 will give you a breakdown per directorate. I don't propose to go into that because that's fairly self-explanatory, unless anybody's got any questions on that after. So within the 24-25 budget, we had quite a large savings target. So that target was £38.4 million. So as you can see, that was a large savings target. 75% of that has been rag rated green, so that's very successful. Those savings have been or are in the process of being delivered. That, however, leaves 6.3 million that were savings that are red rated, so those are assumed to not be delivered. Those are within the forecast position that you see now, so if they do end up being delivered, then that forecast position will improve, so the overspend will come down. So forecast reserves position, obviously with the overspend position this year, we're having to look at using reserves to be able to balance the budget, to present a balanced budget at year end. The forecast at the moment, so the long-term forecast to the end of 2027, so March 27, is suggesting that we'll have £10 million left in unring-fenced grants. So that's general grant that's available to put towards revenue services. There are obviously some other reserves, but they are ring-fenced to specific areas. So the capital position, we've got a 3-year capital programme that's currently standing at just under 500 million, and that was approved by full council on the 13th of February. So that within that there was just over £100 million of new approvals for 25-26 onwards. Spend for 24-25 within the capital programme stands at 71 million as at Q3 against a programme of 114. So the anticipation is that we will spend 114 million by the end of Q4. Just for information, 51% of that capital programme is funded externally. So we've got developer contributions and grants coming into that area. The remainder is a mix of borrowing, which is about 45%, and capital receipts. Obviously, there is a revenue impact of that borrowing of capital. The table on page 54 will detail page 48 will detail those areas for you where that capital programme is sitting and how it is funded. So the position with E&I, so a favourable movement from Q2 to Q3, currently showing at just under 2.3 million underspend. This table would differ slightly to the previous table where we're looking at the directorates because we've taken property out of this table. Obviously property comes up under another scrutiny panel. So currently showing at 2.3 million underspend. That's however offset by home to school transport overspend, which is just under 3 million. So the key headlines for E&I, waste management is giving us a 3.9 million underspend. That was around the contract inflation that was applied to the budget being higher than what was needed. That's been rectified for the 25-26 budget. So the big saving that you see in waste this year will not reoccur in 25 unless inflation drops massively within the next month. There's a forecast underspend in road lighting of 300,000. Again, Dave alluded to that within his presentation around the use of LED lights in street lighting. Again, we're anticipating as that that capital programme has finished now, that we're at a sort of a state level now with that saving, and we won't see any more reduction in that. That again is reflected in the 25-26 budget. So there's an underspend also on passenger transport operation. That's due to additional income generation. There have been a number of grants in that area, quite high value grants that we're utilising to support the budget. Other areas that are showing slight overspends is due in the main to vacancy management targets not being achievable, and also the change in the way we capitalise staff time. So we're not allowed to capitalise at the level that we were doing. So we've had to bring that down, and that's created a pressure in 24-25. Again, that has been rectified for 25-26. And then home school transport, as we alluded to, that's a £3 million overspend around inflation and demand for both mainstream and SEN pupils. There's a good note there in that we're seeing that slightly come down, so we're hoping it won't be at 3 million when we close the accounts down. It will be less than that.
Right, thank you very much, Sarah. So, Ian, do you have a question? Yeah.
Well, I did have questions, but you very kindly answered them as you've gone through. Thank you. Just one observation or comment, compliment really, I suppose, is the investment in the LED lighting is obviously, or has paid some dividends. I've noticed you've just said we won't get that next time. It's not ongoing. It's a one-off statement that we're at now, isn't it?
Well, we'll continue to see that. You know, we've brought the budget down quite considerably. I don't know off the top of my head what the value is, but we have brought it down considerably. But we've done all the changing out now, so the budget that we're at now will be the budget going forward. We won't see another sort of saving within that.
But Madam Chair, I'm really just saying, isn't it been good investment to go into LED? Isn't it?
Absolutely, yes, yeah. I think it was £6 million, wasn't it, investment? And how long will it take to get a return on that?
I'll have to go away and check that, but it certainly is.
No, it's brilliant.
Very positive. Yeah,
it's very good.
Yeah,
thank you. Yeah. I've got a question regarding the reserves position, forecast financial reserves, where we have councillors, divisional fund and elections. If we look into the balance on the 31st of the 3rd, 26, you have £570,000 there, which is presumably divisional budget for 57 members. So does that mean that the elections are in this financial year?
And that there won't be any use of reserve for elections in this financial year. It'll be next. Well, actually, there might be.
Right. I just
Because they'll be
wondered,
getting
can
rid-
you explain those figures?
I will have to go and have away and have a look at those. But you'll see the 570 will be used every year for
Yes.
councillor funds. So you've got that into 2026. So it's just a reducing balance down. I can't remember what the electoral reserve is currently sitting at, but that will form part of that. But the 570s are reduced. You've got 570 every year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Adam, do you
Yeah,
wanna
it was
say
just I
something?
did notice on, I think, corporate and comms, look at the councillor allowances and the divisional funds. I think there was a paper brought to the last scrutiny meeting of the corporate side in terms of the divisional fund allocation. So obviously the difficulty with these is obviously with different scrutiny panels, something sort of cross the boundaries, but it was discussed at the last meeting, I think.
Right. So we can refer to that. Yeah. And Ian, have you got another question? No.
Not for us then, is it?
No, it's not for us. No. Mel.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the LED lights are a real success, but I think from memory, and it was before my time, but I think it was a Lib Dem budget amendment. So I just mentioned, but I think with capital programmes, and it's more of a political question. Obviously, we have Keep Axbridge and we've hit BBC News and Worcester with a huge overspend. I just wondered with other capital projects, I guess a lot of the money is baked in and we have to spend anyway, but I didn't know if there was any change with anything we're doing to reflect or to minimise any overspends, because everything has gone up so much, hasn't it? And with Trump and everything's just going to probably go up more.
I'll come back on the first one because I think I was actually chair of the scrutiny committee that introduced the LED lighting, so I might hold a debate with you as to claiming responsibility for that, because obviously from my point of view in terms of the lighting rollout, that was something I was massively involved with at the time and really pushed. And those, coming back to your question earlier, obviously that cost reduction is forever. So if you're only paying a third for the energy because of the change you've made, you're only going to be paying a third for the energy. And I suppose that's the one area, and I think Gary referred to it earlier, it's about when you do the major things initially that reduce your greenhouse emissions, but equally are economically viable. So that whole investment wasn't done for a view of saving the planet particularly, it was to make sure that we were doing the right thing to save the residents of Worcestershire money by introducing technology that was viably you could afford to pay for it. So the business case was practical. And I think this type of thing really is what the residents want to see us doing, is where there is a practical solution to deliver savings and also gain benefits, then that's the type of thing we're looking at. I'm not sure what your other question was really, Mel.
I think if I may, just obviously the Keep Axbridge was significantly overspent by quite a few million, just I suppose looking for assurance that that's not going to happen with future capital projects. So if we're changing anything we're doing capital-wise.
I would think in terms of what you're looking at, I suppose really, you price up a project for something, don't you? And then a sea of changes happens. I remember doing work during COVID where you couldn't get building supplies, everything was doubling and there were material things there. And I suppose if you'd have priced a project last year and then all of a sudden the government brings in a huge number of changes to national insurance and taxation, then that's going to have an impact on the price of projects as well. So I think really, I wasn't in the role in terms of, and I'm not now in terms of the bridge itself or anything like that. But I think all you can do is rely on the way that you price the contracts and try and ensure that you can get good value for money. But material factors do change. There are world crises, I think, that you alluded to, and sometimes they have a major impact. I mean, you imagine if you've priced something now that requires something to be brought in from somewhere and somebody suddenly put a 25% taxation or levy on it, you're going to be in difficulties. I think you've just got to be incredibly careful with the way you apportion the contracts. But I suppose it would come to the point that if it's a material cost increase, we've got to try and deal with it. But I do agree with you on your point. You've got to manage it as well as possible. But I do think the team within the county council do that anyway. but there are, as you've said, outside factors that can really adversely affect that. But all we can do is our very best. But if Trump's going to suddenly increase the price of something by 25%, there's very little we can do other than try and manufacture it in the UK. But with the energy prices we've got at the moment, it's very, very difficult. So it's tough to be a business out there, and I think we do understand that, and we're trying to do our very best for the businesses in Worcestershire to help them through that. But you make some valid points, Mel.
So, anything else? No, that's good. All right. Well, thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you. I think we're moving on to next item, which will be the work programme. Yep, thank you. Okay, so next meeting, 15th of July. Sorry, where are we? Where's the date of that? 2nd of July, sorry. So next meeting, 2nd of July, and Adam has suggested that we add mobile signals to that one. Are we okay with that? Yep. And in terms of the list of the other items we have on here, should we go through that? So, proposed changes to Royal Mail deliveries. Is that really one for us? No. Thank you. Shall we take that out? Yeah.
Where did that come from?
No idea.
It was suggested at a recent meeting of OSPB. The last meeting of OSPB, it was suggested.
Where we can influence at all.
I think, no, we throw that one out, I think. Yeah.
Perhaps the changes are you've got to go back to licking the stamp. Oh, sorry, are we still on?
Yes, we still.
I do apologise.
Right, so we're going to take that one out. The economic challenges of town centres. Well, I think it's valid if it relates to employment
Or businesses.
and businesses.
Well,
Shall we leave it in?
may I speak?
Yes, sure.
This is, before the meeting, we had some very quick discussion on our past meetings over the previous year, where, in fact, each district council, we visited each district council, where we were to hear their main challenges. And I feel a little bit concerned that I've never heard much about our doing of that since. And this is almost, to me, perhaps harking towards that same kind, not necessarily doing the visits, but I think the important thing is to have two-way communication. I can't recall, apart from each meeting that we attended, I can't recall we the county council, going back on some of the issues that were raised, unless they've done that, our officers, and we've not been told. So all I'm saying is, please, I think it should stay in, but I think we've got to tailor the way in which we handle the subject.
Yeah, on the basis that each one of those councils was brought into us, and they presented and they explained their challenges, but there should have been a process, a formal process of responding to them, and maybe that's just something to be noted with regards to scrutiny in the future. You know, that if somebody external, you know, the same would apply with the NFU or whatever. If somebody external comes in and explains their issues, they should have a formal response from the officers involved and maybe the cabinet member.
And that we should know about it.
Yeah, and we should know about it.
Yeah, and I think I recall going to not all of them, but some of them, and it felt very much that the cities and districts came with their cases, but we sort of came back with challenge, but not really anything else. But I think as a scrutiny panel, we needed it to work both ways a bit. So I'd really like to see some feedback and something come out of here.
No, I think that's a fair ask, yes, because if you go to the full council meeting, you would get a written response, and really that should happen here if somebody external comes in. Yeah. So then we've got the role of the council in encouraging the development of commercial space and support for specific growth areas identified in the Economic Strategy Plan for Growth 2020-24. Well, I think that's a good one. Yeah, we should include that one. Don't know when. Can we include that one in July? Maybe. Business startups. Well, we can see that there are problems with business startups. It's difficult. So.
We've had some explanation from Gary, particularly today, but maybe it is a subject in itself that we all ought to understand and be assured that the county, and I'm sure we are, but I think it needs the opportunity for Gary to give that statement that we are doing this, we're doing that, all positive towards supporting this. So I think it is a subject in itself.
Yeah, so we'll keep business startups in there. Yeah. Science parks, I also think valid. Yeah.
Yes.
Very valid. Yeah. Implications of the cancellation of the High Speed 2 HS2 on Local Transport Plan 5.
Look at the comment there on the right hand side.
Awaiting government guidance.
And the question about whether it's our environment rather. I don't know. We mustn't lose it, but one or other of the panels perhaps should be involved. But we need to get clarification on whether it's us or...
Yeah, clarification. Yeah, that's good. Clarification on whether it's ours, but keep it on the long list. Yeah.
I think.
The budget scrutiny process. Yeah. Anything else that we'd like to add?
Do we need to do anything around local government reorganisation, or is that more for main OSPB? Oh, sorry. I'm just thinking about the costs, and I don't know, because it is going to cost a lot. But
personally, I think we definitely should include that.
I do know that that's being considered by OSPB at its next meeting. Next week, in fact.
You have to nudge someone's elbow.
So following that, we, that's probably going to be valid, yeah. But what form it's going to be valid in is the question maybe as well. But reorganisation, yeah, definitely. Anything else? No?
We're happy with what else is there.
Okay, so shall we finish the meeting? Yeah. Thank you very much for coming along.
sorry, I was slightly late.